everyone. Thank you for joining us in another session of Cafecito and Conversation or Coffee and Conversation. I am here with Angelina Hernandez, but before I have her introduce herself, just want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing this and who am I. So my name is Dominica Escatel. I am the founder of Chicana Inc. And our signature event is a in-person speaker series called Chingona 101, which if you Google the definition, which I challenge you to, basically my interpretation is the steps to become a badass, powerful, poderosa woman, authentically, and everything under the sun that implies that. And so because of COVID and having to pivot and wanting to still keep the community engaged, I decided to do these online, more intimate, just coffee chats. And so I've asked Angelina to come and join me. And so I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelina Hernandez. Thank you, Dominica, for creating this space. I know that when I first heard your story, which I hope you share, I was just like, oh my gosh, I love everything that she's saying. Like, yes, more power to the Latino community, the Latino badasses. So I was super excited when we decided to just work together a little bit. Because I felt like finally I met someone who's like on the same mission that I am. So I'm super excited. A little bit about me. So I like to think of myself as like a modern day curandera. And that's just been a journey for me for the last 6 years, where I'm just really developing my connection to the divine, to spirit, God, whatever you choose that to be. And I'm kind of taking it back to like old Mexican traditional folk healing with combining it with like all of these new techniques that I've learned. And I'm just on this journey to help other Latinas connect again to their core being, their divine purpose. And I'm super excited about it. So thank you.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you here. So I have to tell you a funny story. So when there was a year that I went to a conference and I was with a group of friends and we stopped at a Starbucks to order some drinks. And because no one at Starbucks could ever say my name correctly, I like to just say a different name that's easier, that's easy to say, easy to spell. Okay. And so I had that specific day, I had chosen Monica. And I told my friends, I'm like, hey, I have to go to the ladies' room. Can you pick up my drink? And it didn't occur to me to tell them, look out for Monica. They were waiting for Dominica. And I was like, I went and I came back and I was still standing. I'm like, I saw them standing there and I'm like, what are we doing still standing here? Is my drink ready? And they're like, no, we haven't heard the name. I'm like, it's right there. It says Monica. And they're like, but what? I was like, I completely forgot to tell you that I like to switch up my names. Because I started doing that because the last time that I was at a different conference and literally they spelled my name with the Kormenika, Kormenika.
Oh my God.
Like, you get Dominica from Kormenika. Like that was it. I'm like, I'm just gonna say something easy. And honestly, I think it's funny. I didn't really it's not an issue for me. Like when I go to Starbucks, some of my friends are like, no, you shouldn't have to do that. Like, it's your name, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nah, it's totally cool. I just don't want to fight with it. And the baristas, they're having to worry about drinks and maybe perhaps people yelling at me. My name really to have it on the cup doesn't matter. So I bring this up because I want to kick us off right. So do you prefer Angelina or Angelina?
Either or doesn't bother me. But at least you're asking because same situation. I didn't think my heart was that name to say growing up, I remember never having meeting another person with my name. Mm-hmm. And so, but now, of course, I hear of all kinds of Angelinas. But when I was growing up, I was like, it's not that name. People would call me Angelina. Like, I'm like, it's Angelina. It's not that hard.
Right.
But yeah, either or. I go, it
Okay.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I actually, you're right. And I started, you would think with Dominica, like it's always at the forefront to make sure I pronounce or say someone's name right, because I know how much mine gets botched up. So I'm okay with Dominica too, but the way that you say it is Domenica.
Yeah.
And but like friends and growing up here in this community, it was just like Dominica is easier. It's totally cool.
Yeah.
And everybody would keep asking me, well, do you have a nickname? Like even growing up, my teacher would say, do you have a nickname? I'm like, no, you can't make a nickname out of Dominica. Like,
Yeah.
so anyways, I love sharing that story because I think it just proves a point on being able to connect with somebody through their name. And
Yes.
I love that you mentioned that you would, you prefer either one, because I'm like the same way, either one. But you would think it would be easy to say Dominica, but it still gets crazy botched up.
Yeah.
But so speaking about beverages, and because this is Cafecito conversation, so just a disclaimer, we always have our coffee cups like
Yes.
that. Ooh. And so you'll see us, if you're viewing us, you'll see us drinking those throughout the time period that we're here together. And the idea is that if you're watching us, join us with your cup of coffee and enjoy some good conversation. And if you're listening, well, I hope that you're listening with your favorite beverage. So Angelina, what is your favorite beverage?
So, I mean, I love to drink water. I drink a lot of tea. Unfortunately, I've never been a huge coffee person. And I'm like, I wish I was, because I love the aromas. I love the way it smells. I grew up around coffee. My grandfather had a coffee bean plantation in Mexico. So growing up, I was around coffee a lot, and they still actually produce the coffee in Mexico. My cousins and my uncle, they still, cultivate coffee beans. So shout out to my family in Nayarit. But I just have never been a huge coffee person. And so I drink a lot of tea, a lot of infused water. I use it with like lemon and ginger and cucumber, all kinds of things, just to make it just more, I like to think of it as a detoxifying opportunity, but I love water and tea.
Okay, no, I surprisingly enough, my stomach cannot handle coffee.
Yes.
It just irritated. I just can't. And
Yeah.
so the thing that I can handle is some type of like chai latte that comes remotely to mimicking coffee. I actually found this new company, and this is completely not a paid promotion. I just love to share when I find new products. And it's called Mud Water. Sounds kind of funky, but hey, let's go with it. It actually tastes really good. It's a coffee alternative. It tastes more like a chai latte, but I like to heat it up with almond milk, and then I add like cocoa honey there. Amazing. So if you don't find me drinking that, I drink tea as well. And I love lemon, just hot water with lemon. And then some raw honey, obviously, too. So that's one of my favorite things to do. So yeah, I love to also mix some of my teas, because I used to belong to a monthly tea club. And they would send you all these different teas. And one of the tips that they had, when they send you the pamphlets of like where this tea is from, is they'll give you different teas and to mix and match. You actually can stack them and heat them and then create all these different flavors, which I had no idea. I just thought, oh, okay, I'll just take this packet, put in the water, and then we're done. So that was a little fun tip that I learned through them. So Angelina, tell me, what are you excited about right now?
I'm excited about learning and sharing and hearing so many of our Latino sisters that have embarked on a discovery journey of self-growth, connecting, knowing, getting to know who they really are, what their purpose is. I've like had so many women reach out to me lately, just wanting to do some healing work. And so I love to hear when, women acknowledge that there's something out there for them and they're trying to get to that point where they're just like, okay, it's time. And especially right now, with everything going on, I feel like there's we always talk about like an awakening. And so people are coming more to the realization that they were just meant to like live a life of abundance and not just like this, with everything going on with COVID and people having to be at home. I think it just really slowed down. It forced us actually to slow down and just really reflect on what it is that we want to do right in life. And it doesn't align with our purpose. And so I love getting into conversations about that. It like lights me up.
I love that. And you said something so important about reflecting. I am infamous for saying that there's a gift in amongst the chaos. Yes. And I know that in the moment it doesn't feel like that. And that theory is not always going to be something that is easily revealed. I really feel like you kind of have to dig a little bit deep to extract the gift and what we go through. And I feel like this is exactly what is happening through COVID, is that it's a time to really have a forced step back to be able to reflect and analyze like what was working in your life, what wasn't, like who was working in your life, who was not. And really take that time to do not only that, but like also infuse self-care because,
super important.
It's like with all these like unknowns through COVID, and it's like having this in your face, like, oh my gosh, like what do I do to boost my immunity? Like how do I even start? Especially coming from a Latino culture that's heavily infused with the love of food. And it's like a lot of those foods, I felt growing up were always working against the grain of my body, and so, I always would have to find ways to infuse, healthy habits into my meal plan or like my daily routine. And that was just kind of an awakening that I felt like I kind of let that all slip. And now it's like, how do I bring that back at the forefront? So I love that people can connect with someone like you that has the passion and wants to keep that ancestral knowledge and culture still alive. Because I think, like you mentioned, the keyword curandera, that there's a stigmatism behind that, or a lot of people have a stereotype of what they believe that is.
Yeah.
But my interpretation is like the root of holistic healing. So can you talk a little bit about like what does that look like?
So it's funny that you talked about food. So through this whole journey, and I've been in healthcare, actually, I think that's where the passion for me started. I've worked in healthcare pretty much since I was 19. Initially, I thought my path to caring for others was going to be through medicine, like Western medicine. And I was on target to go back to school to get my master's to be a PA. But something shifted inside me, and I think it's just life experiences. The first one is my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And so for the first time, I was on the other side of that whole not being a healthcare worker. It was more of like caring for someone who was, going through something like a terminal disease. And so I really just my whole mindset shifted because that journey was not pleasant. Like I was constantly just fighting the system, trying to get testing done, and so I just really started to see healthcare through a different perspective. And then I have a friend, my best friend, who I've known since like 7th grade. She was having some health issues, and just the diagnosis and everything took forever. and they couldn't figure out what it was. Then they misdiagnosed her. Well, at the end of like just thousands and thousands of hours of trying to get her diagnosed, they couldn't come up with anything. And one of the treatment options that they offered her caused her to lose her vision.
Okay.
And so that whole thing just completely shifted. I was just like, I was just like, I would never want to put someone through that. Like just seeing all the grief that she's, went through, and then completely having to change her life. Now she can no longer work or drive or do any of the things that we normally do, right? And so I just really started, that whole stress just really started just to affect my body, and it started manifesting in symptoms that I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was happening. And so I share this with people because I think it's pretty funny. Our bodies and our minds are so powerful, and we just don't really stop to acknowledge that because we think, oh, okay, like, something must be wrong with me, because that's how I was. I'm like, I was trying to figure out, I was going to the doctor. I started developing some like inflammation in my body, and my lips would swell. And so I always say that it was funny because it wasn't like both of my lips would swell and I'd have like these like luscious like lips, like I had just had like, it would just be like one or the other, or just half of my lip. And then I would just have tingling in my body. And it just was so uncomfortable because I would be at work and all of a sudden, like, I'd have a fat lip. And so I went through this whole, like, going to the doctor, getting tested for allergies. I was like writing down everything I was eating, and they still couldn't figure out, and they just kept putting me like on medication. And so I was just like, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, enough. Like, I need to figure this out. And so I just really started listening, number one, to my body. And I just started weeding out the things, both like from a physical, like, so before I would never exercise. So I started going to yoga.
Okay.
I wasn't obviously taking care of myself as far as food goes, because, when you're like in a anxiety or depressed state, you really like go to comfort food.
Right.
And so I started just eating clean. I started just practicing like holistic practices like meditation, gratitude journaling, just all these different things. And I started seeking out holistic spiritual healing. And so I met a previous mentor of mine who introduced me to energy healing, and it's called Reiki. And a lot of people have heard of it. For those of you who haven't, it's a Japanese form of energy healing, and I look at it like similar in our culture, like hands-on prayer type of thing. Curanderas, use all kinds of other different modalities as well. But I really just started focusing on that. And, before I knew it, like the Lipson thing went away. I was in a better place. And so I just really started focusing on like all of the things, on how to merge, how to connect that whole mind, body, spirit, and reintegrate to feel like, okay, I'm a whole person again. I can function. One isn't out of balance than the other. And so I developed this. I didn't develop it, but there's a lot of literature about the connection of the mind, body, spirit. But I think I just went within and started sharing what was working and what was making me feel at peace. And so I just started sharing that with people. And so then before you knew it, they were like, oh my gosh, can you do this on me? And so that's kind of how it evolved. So for the past 6 years, I've been on this journey. I've worked with different kind of healers, from like, there's another one like the Hindu culture called Ayurveda. And so that's more like with food, and it's like a medicine, like their medicine ways. I'm currently working with a curandera. I've actually been working with her for the past 6 years, just on different healing practices. But right now I'm really focused on holding ceremonies. And so I hope to be done with that in August and be able to offer different things, making like remedios, things like that, things that are like, now that I have the opportunity to ask my mom, I wish that I would have like been able to ask my dad about different things that maybe he saw growing up. But I asked my mom, and like all of a sudden she's like telling me like, oh, well, your grandma used to do these things, and she put it on our belly button. And I was just like, I started asking my aunts, and just like all this information started coming, I remember personally after I started doing this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember when my aunt, when I was going through my divorce, my aunt came from Mexico and she was like, you need a limpia. And she like went outside, cut some things from the tree, some branches from a tree,
Okay.
started praying, like hitting me with them, like going throughout my house. And then
Oh my God.
she did the whole thing with the egg. And so I was just like, all those things I had forgotten about. And then it was through this work that I was like, oh my gosh, like this is part of who I am, like my family, like, and so it's been really awesome to just remember those things and just to have more of the information and the knowledge like from my mom. And so like she laughs at me now and she tells me like, oh, but when I would tell you drink this tea, for this, you would be like, no, I'm just going to take a pill. Like, so yeah, we have fun about it now, but yeah, it's just like, everything is connected. And I think a lot of people are remembering those things now. And so they're just searching and discovering. And I think that's amazing.
No, I think it's really beautiful that you can honor, our culture in that way and traditions and the root of like who we are, right? And like what a blessing that you'll be able to, that you're cultivating this and being able to not only help others, but be able to pass that wisdom and knowledge down as well. Because, I too remember things that like, if, we'd go to a friend's house and, they would help us with some teas or, they would give my mom some like plantas that she can cook later and just, boil it this way and give that to them for this and this for that. But, as life progresses, you just, I never thought to ask those questions until I got older.
Yeah.
And I love the ability to be able to connect with someone that really is doing a deep dive in this work and can be at the forefront of not only like conserving, these things, but also be able to share that with everyone else. So I think it's just amazing work and I love it. And
I think that's what, like, when I heard you speak about what you were doing and, I mean, yeah, please share, because I think that providing a space, for women to share what the things that they're doing and the things they're developing for like our community is amazing. Like when I heard you speak, I was like, oh my gosh, like she's like doing what I want to do. And I think for you, because I heard your story about like being from education and like kind of pivoting that, because growing up, like I'm sure most of our Latino sisters and brothers have heard, the way you honor us is by going to school and getting an education. And I think that's such a like overwhelming like thing for some people. Like school isn't for everyone. And so I feel like by hearing stories like yours, I'm like, see, like perfect example. Like she went from education to entrepreneur, and it's like amazing. Not that school is bad, but I just want people to know that it's not always the path for everyone. And so, because I feel like, even within like, people that I know or family, like, when you decide not to pursue or whatever, you kind of get like this, like, well, what are you doing type of like, because I had already professed to everyone like in my family, oh, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get my PA, like,
Yeah.
When I decided not to do that, they were like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah. Right. No, and really, so I've been asked the question, Dominica, like, what was the thing that made you shift in that way? And I really interpret that question as like, how did you realize what your purpose was in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have 15 years of educational experience, and that was like the profession that I followed. And I always say that being a first generation college student is like, you have to be able to navigate the system to make it work. And I unfortunately didn't have that person, I was missed. You know, I had to figure out. I didn't really have anyone to guide me, and I was questioned on why I wanted to go to school. Period. Not encouraged, questioned, right? And so I kind of just, my first degrees in photography and art, and that was because I was good at it. I was in a photography class, and I got praised so much that I just ended up majoring in it. And so when it comes to really like discovering your field or what you're good at or your niche, like I didn't have the skills, or I didn't even know how to unfold that. It was literally that I was just getting compliments, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll just do this and cross my fingers that it's all going to work out. And unfortunately, what happened is that I didn't have the experience of the and then some. And so nobody, you graduate, and now what? You end up with this massive loan.
Yes, so thank you for speaking to that, because I'm still in debt from my bachelor's degree, and I'm just like, I really don't even understand what happened here.
Right. And so as quickly of that grace period of that loan going into effect, I had to find a job.
Yes.
And so I ended up at a nonprofit that had nothing to do with what I studied. And so I kind of just became comfortable there. I did love what I did for so long. It's always going to be a part of me. I feel like I could always use those skills, but that opportunity led to another opportunity. And my last organization, I was there for 10 years. But as I was there, I stumbled upon entrepreneurship, and I was hooked. And then there was a moment in my career, my educational career, where I started getting sick. And I realize now in hindsight that was my heartstrings being pulled in a different direction.
Your spirit, yeah.
Yes, that was the signal to me that I was being realigned to directly be in the path of my purpose. Like, not that education wasn't, and not that what I did everything before then was not. It's just that I was being shifted, and I could feel it. And it just manifested itself in a couple of different ways. But the biggest signal is when I woke up one day, and literally, like, I couldn't move my arm. It was like frozen. And I didn't fall, I didn't hit it. Like, literally, I just couldn't move it. And the only thing that I could have done is really slept, like, with all my weight on the arm. But even then, it was frozen. And so what was weird about it is that I had the same injury on the opposite arm a couple of years ago. But I did fall there. Like, I was going through a set of doors. The person in front of me didn't hold them, and I shimmied through the door because I had things in both of my hands. And instead of my brain triggering, drop them, Dominica, drop this stuff in your hands, I just held them. I tripped, and all my weight landed against the receptionist desk of the building screen, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel it till much later in the evening, and I ended up in the ER. So fast forward, they thought I broke it or something, and x-rays were clean. And the doctors were baffled, like, well, you didn't break it, but your pain really is like if you were to have broken your arm. And it ended up being a frozen rotator cuff with your shoulder.
Yeah.
Pain, horrible pain. Well, so I had to go to therapy. That took months to, be fine. And then thankfully, fast forward, when I woke up with the same issue, I had a friend who specializes in holistic health, and her name just popped in my brain. And I reached out to her in about 3 sessions, very similar work like you do. 3 sessions, I was good as new. But really, that was the defining moment of realizing I have to shift.
Yes.
And so really, since then, full force, 100% in entrepreneurship, and really allowing myself to be immersed in that path. And so if you ever want to take, and I believe that you identified it too with your moment of having people in your life, unfortunately, really, knowing that traditional Western medicine wasn't being effective and actually was hurting them more. And so, like, when I hear you speak, I'm like, that's the moment that she had. That's like my moment, but you know, what happened with my arm, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think sometimes where we don't like come to that realization is when we fight that. When we're like looking at in the exterior and saying something else has to be going on. But when you really tune in and you listen and you're honest with yourself, you can recognize things like that and be like, okay, like what I'm currently doing is affecting me physically and manifesting in my body in this way. What can I do to shift that? Right. And so that's really when the work starts. And so I always say, like, it is one of the bravest things that you can do to really go within and heal yourself. You know, we all carry things, whether it's, you know, trauma from growing up, trauma from being in a relationship or a marriage, trauma that you had, you know, because of maybe your kids, or even ancestral traumas. Like, you know, all these things are part of who we are. And so I think diving deep and just acknowledging that is one of the biggest blessings you can do for yourself and the people you love, because it really becomes a ripple effect, right? When you are like true to who you are and you follow that path and you discover your purpose, you are just in a different space that people naturally gravitate to that energy. And it's like, wait, I want to hang out with that girl. Because I feel like that's exactly what happened when I'm just like, I want to get to know her story. I want to know what she's doing. I want to, you know, hear all about it. And I want to spread her message, because literally that's what we need to do. We need to create communities that are empowering each other and get out of this mentality that we have to like compete with each other. It's totally not like that. So.
Right. No, and I love that. Thank you for saying that, because you know, I started in this journey literally because I needed to pay my student loans and entrepreneurship. And when I realized that there was a different lifestyle that you can have, especially when you're aligned with doing something that you love, and the passion comes out of you, the charisma comes out of you, and you just want to share that with everybody. And, you know, you don't have to be in a spot where, you know, you clock in and it feels eternal. And I'm speaking generically, just as a blanket statement, you know, and that, you know, the ups and downs of working for someone else. It's like, really, there was a quote that a couple of years ago that I came across that said something to the effect like, you're exchanging your life for your paycheck.
Yeah, like trading time for money.
Yeah. And so the bulk of your time, you know, you're in this organization, and unless you have somebody coaching you, or you have an amazing example through your network or your family of really being able to identify it, if you know, are they supporting me? Am I getting paid with what I'm worth? You know, are they you know, do I have a good benefits package? Like, there's so much tied to when you work for somebody else. And of course, there's all these amazing organizations, there's all these you know, amazing employers, but when it comes down to entrepreneurship, it really is a lifestyle and a beast in its own, in the way that it takes someone to recognize another person that's in the same path, and to be able to come together and like cultivate that tribe to really be able to support each other. Because it's like, wow, like you said, I love what she's about. Like, oh my gosh, I want to be able to share her with everyone, and it doesn't affect me at all. Like, if I am enhancing her and opening those doors for her, like, why not? And sometimes in that employer mindset, like, you don't get that. You know, there's a hierarchy that you have to honor in management and all that. And that's kind of the difference in the sense that I interpret it with entrepreneurship, is that you really can manifest and cultivate a space where your team grows and thrives, and you let people in to come alongside of you and run together and do this thing, entrepreneurship, what I call entrepreneurship together.
Yeah. And I think too, the other thing that you're doing is, hopefully you dive into a little bit of exactly what you're doing, but you know, I know you're in the Central Valley and there is such a huge Latino population out there. And so I think that you're creating space for other younger girls who are looking and um you know, they see you and they think, I can be that person. Like this is like what I want to do. And so we're creating the opportunity for someone else to see themselves in our stories, right? Because that's really what happens is we see each other, a part of ourselves in someone else's story. Like I remember when I heard you talk about, I don't know if you can say this and talk about it, but like when you mentioned to me about the TED Talk that you know, had an opportunity, I was like, oh my God, I have a Latina who's going to be on and do a TED Talk. Like what? You know, that was like, I want to know all about that, you know, because obviously I want to be able to do that one,
Right.
you know, like I on my vision board, like I have so many like things, you know, where I have my vision board. And I think when I meet people like you, it like just inspires me and shows me that it can happen for me too.
No, thank you. So, yes, I got selected to do a TED Talk this year. I was 2 weeks away from being on stage when quarantine happened. And so the event was postponed. But really, I had that goal in my, I have this little book of goals.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a while, I'll post it on my social media thread. Actually, I was going to post it last night now that you mention it, but I didn't get a chance to. And literally, I don't think we've even talked about this. I have this book that was 100 goals,
Mm-hmm.
and you fill in 100 goals, right? And so I've been working on it for a couple of years, probably like 3 years now. I have these 100 goals plugged in. And at first, I wasn't able to even fill like 10 out. Right. I'm like, oh no, as an entrepreneur, that's an issue. And then slowly, like things started popping up. Oh, yeah, I would love to do that. And then it was reshaping my mindset that we live a limitless life full of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's like, why not dream without limits? And I was just plugging things in, and I plugged in a TED Talk. And there you go, I got selected. And so that is not only a terrifying goal, but it was like within reach. Like it was there. I had signed all the waivers. I had submitted my my photo, the one that they're going to put in media, and I had cleared out my calendar to be present the days that we were going to get interviewed by the media and do our practice rounds. And unfortunately, COVID had different plans. And so, it was really saying to myself, you know what, that is a postponement. That is there. Like it will work out. And then till that happens, what can I do to like pivot or just continue on my path? Because it's hard as hell. Like I won't lie. Like there's moments where I feel like I'm living a bell curve, like great days, I feel happy, but then reality kind of sinks in and it's like, crap, I can't go anywhere, like, for my safety and the safety of others. Like I'm just home. So what can I do to keep continuing to having at the forefront like what I love doing and helping other women or others in general? And so because I couldn't do the TED Talk, this is kind of where also the Cafecito conversation kind of aligned with it. And I thought, you know what, if I can't share my message right now, well, then let me share it in this way, being able to come with other mujeres and just kind of share, some coffee with one of my favorite cups of coffee, which is actually my Harvard cup. So that's a whole different story.
Yeah, which is amazing itself too.
Yeah. And so I got that from speaking, and this cup really has been a godsend in the sense of like reminded me that is still in your path. It's just at the moment, just taking that pause and then being able to figure out like, what can I do in this moment they can still continue to allow me to tell my story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you and I, we've talked about this a lot. So, during this COVID, also like everything has shifted for me too, as far as my business and what I can do. But yeah, it's like finding ways, right? Like we are innovative people. And so you and I have talked about multiple streams of income, develop wealth. And so one of my goals is to change the financial footprint for my family, because I know where our struggles were growing up, and my parents, again, first generation, my parents came here from Mexico, they worked in the fields, all those things. And so I remember that conversation where my dad used to tell me, go to school, get a job, work there for 40 years, or however long that is, get a retirement plan, and you retire when you're like 60. Well, that type of environment doesn't exist anymore. And I think that like millennials, people always like, oh, millennials are lazy. But I'm like, they just don't want to settle. Like they have it very clear that they're not like the type of people that want to go into an office for every single day, 8 to 5, 40 years, and like all that drama. But you and I agree that, multiple streams of income, we've agreed on the number 7. That
Right.
seven is the magic number. And I actually became very aware of that when I was working in corporate America. I was working for this company who had such a diverse portfolio as far as buying other companies and having them be like a subcategory of who they were. And like they had like all these things, and it just really started making me realize like successful people, even like the stars, like, like, I mean, not that I follow Kim Kardashian, I don't follow her, but I think about like all the things that she's in, right? Like she's developed all these things. She didn't just rely on the one thing that made her famous. She started realizing, okay, in order for revenue to continue to grow, I need to like shift it and putting in other buckets. And so yeah, I always talk about that because I think it's super important. As long as those 7 things are aligned with who you are at a core. So for me, I know direct sales companies get like, a really bad like reputation, but the one thing that propelled me into this whole journey was becoming a part of a direct sales company. And it's a health and wellness company. And that's where really I started developing my like getting coached from the very first time. So I think those things, if you can find a company that aligns with what you are sharing with the world, your purpose. I always tell people, if even if you don't do it for a long time, even if you're just doing it for a couple extra $100 a month, because like that's why I started. I just wanted extra money to pay my college payment. And but I started getting all this coaching, so like it was free, and it just really started shifting my mind, who I was, what I meant to do. And then I got into my healing practice, holding ceremonies. I've done real estate, continue to do that. I've learned about investing. I've learned how to make money work for me versus the other way around. Right. So it's been a huge shift, and it's a total blessing. So, just, yeah.
And you know what? That is really a great spot to leave off on. So if you want to know more about cultivating generational wealth to come out, join us with another session. Definitely. Angelina, we are going to do this again.
Yes.
And I know we have some webinars coming up, you and I. But I believe that's a great spot to leave off on. That was like one of the founding principles that blew my mind. It just blew my mind to realize like, oh, wow, it's not just about having a cushiony job or cultivating a space that you're living a little bit more than paycheck to paycheck. It's really more about breaking those chains of like poverty and creating a comfortable lifestyle. And yes, the principle is 7 avenues of income. And so finding 7 different ways that you can generate income to live a life of freedom and flexibility. So we will sign off with that. Angelina, tell everybody how they can connect with you through social media.
You guys can find me at blissfullatina.com. I have my new website coming soon, but it'll be blissfullatina.com. Yeah, I'm on Facebook as Angelina Hernandez. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, want to know more about how to create your passions or find your passions, discover what they are, any question, let me know. I'm here to serve you guys. Thank you, Dominica, too, for allowing me to share.
No, of course. Thank you for coming into the space with me. And again, my name is Dominica Escatel. You can connect with me through Chicana Inc., Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And join us every month. We have different cafecito and conversations, or eventually when we go into in person, it will be in-person events. But till then, connect with us through social media, and signing off. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.